Oh, sorry about that. The hockey mask keeps the grease spatters off my face. So you're probably wondering why I'm dressed like a dunce at this time of year. Well, there's Christmas in July, which made my buddy Derek, aka Happy Video Game Nerd, ask the question, why not Halloween in May? So he asked the contributors on RetroWare TV if they wanted to get in on this Halloween in May idea, and I was like, okay. So without further tomfoolery, here's my review of Castlevania for the Nintendo 64. And by the way, I'm not just grilling because it's a nice May day outside. I figured since Dracula's in this video, I better be ready with some steaks. I don't know, I always hear that you gotta put a stake in the heart of a vampire to kill him. They've got a problem with high cholesterol or something.
Now, based on my own personal experience, there will be some of you that are probably thinking, this video is already scary because Castlevania on the Nintendo 64 is horrifyingly terrible. And everyone's entitled to their opinion. I mean, this game definitely has some problems. But, like Castlevania II Simon's Quest, it isn't without some redeeming qualities. Actually, before I started doing research for this review, I was under the impression that this game was pretty much universally hated. The reason for that is I used to work at a video game store when I was 16, and everyone that played the game said it was a big disappointment for Castlevania fans that were excited to see Castlevania make the transition to 3D. Even Nintendo Power's review of Castlevania for the N64 wasn't exactly glowing. I mean, they gave it a 7.9 out of 10, which isn't awful, but it's only 0.4 points higher than the score they gave South Park. Yeesh. If you know me, you know that I love Castlevania. But even when I was reading about Castlevania on the N64 and Nintendo Power, I was a little concerned about the transition from 2D to 3D, and I remember wondering how is whipping gonna work in 3D? It just seemed like it'd be awkward. After I heard again and again that it wasn't a good game, I still had to see for myself, so I rented it and went into it with the mindset that it was probably gonna be a letdown. Under the influence of what I had heard from the gripes of others, I too found the camera to be broken, the lock-on to be tedious, and the platforming to be ridiculously awkward. In fact, I think this is where I just gave up all hope and quit. I honestly didn't give it a fair chance, but at the time I had plenty of other games for my job to keep me busy, so that was the last time I played it until recently. I know that it's common to look back on things with rose-tinted spectacles only to find out years later it might not really be as good as you remembered it, but for me, Castlevania had the opposite effect. I remember hating it, but now I kinda like it. I still don't like Brussels sprouts though. Those will always make me gag. Anyway, despite my initial thoughts about what other people thought about this game, I found out that the game actually got pretty decent reviews overall and that there are people out there that really like Castlevania on the N64. However, by now you've probably seen the Angry Video Game Nerd's hilarious review of this game in AVGN, Castlevania Part 3, SNES and N64. I'd like to reiterate that I'm a huge fan of James's work and I wouldn't be doing these videos if it weren't for him, but while I agreed with some of the things he said, and I know it isn't meant to be taken seriously, I'll be taking a stance similar to my video response to Angry Video Game Nerd's review of Castlevania II Simon's Quest. Basically, I'm going to try to defend the game while being as fair as possible and point out some of the highlights and downfalls of Castlevania. Now, you may have noticed that I keep calling it Castlevania and not Castlevania 64 as it's often called. Well, that's because it actually is called Castlevania and not Castlevania 64 like you'd expect given the long line of something 64 games that came out during the Nintendo 64's life cycle. Much like the Super something games that came out on the Super Nintendo. In Japan, the game was called Akumajo Dracula Mokushiroku, literally Devil Castle Dracula Apocalypse, making it literally the best title for a video game I've heard besides Super Meat Boy. Anyway, first off you've got the typical Castlevania intro. Century of human sin and Dracula's reawakened, and the goal of the game is to defeat Dracula. The music really sets the tone at the start, and the graphics, while not great by any means, were okay for the time. Zelda had just come out 2 months earlier though, and it looked much better, but Zelda was going for a more stylized look, while Castlevania was going for a more realistic look. The animations can be a little whack though. That's exactly how I walk when I have to take a dump really bad. When you're sliding into first and you feel something burst, Sorry. Right out of the gate, one of the coolest things about this game is you can choose from 2 different characters, Reinhard Schneider and Carrie Fernandez, each with their own story, moves, and their own special levels at points in the game. Actually, there were supposed to be 4 playable characters in the game, but 2 of them were pulled during development in order to complete the game faster. For the purpose of this review, I'll go with the heir of the Belmont crew. You know, represent. You can also choose from 2 difficulties when you start. Easy, which gives you unlimited cash money and maxed out weapon energy, and normal, which doesn't. Well, let's play it on easy for the purpose of this review because there's no time. I'll talk about the differences in the difficulty later on, trust me. Let's do this. So where'd that cool music from the beginning go? It's just rain and the sound of skeletons coming out of the ground. As AVGN said, the music sucks. Actually, there are places where you don't hear any music at all, like outside aside from the boss fights, but inside the castle there's some really great music. Even when there isn't any music, I think the atmospheric sounds still work really well. So let's start with the first main complaint about this game, the controls. Well, the control scheme is a bit awkward, but you get used to it over time and it actually isn't that bad. As for the actual play control, however, there are some problems. Everything is fine while you're running around, but whipping can be a bit awkward, like I expected. Luckily, you can auto-lock onto enemies by using the R button, which helps out, but the problem is that when you have multiple enemies, your character gets a bit indecisive about which enemy you want to attack. Auto-lock will go for the closest enemy, but there's no way I've found to select another enemy without getting closer to the intended target and trying again. This can be a problem when you're just trying to attack the boss and other guys are getting in the way, or when you just want to attack a specific enemy first. Another nuisance is having to push a button to pick up items. I'd like to be able to just walk over to that massive pile of stuff and collect it all at once, but no, you have to push a button to pick up each item individually, and items disappear pretty quickly. One thing that's good about having to push a button to pick up items is that it makes it less likely that you'll pick up a weapon that you don't want unless they're right next to each other, and it beats accidentally picking up a crappy weapon or having to wait for it to disappear like in the old Castlevania games. Now for the worst part about the controls, jumping and platforming. When you jump, the controls are pretty floaty and it's easy to overjump or underjump, especially if you aren't facing the exact direction you intend to jump because your character will do a little side jump thing. I remember quitting this game the first time I played it around this part, and there are some pretty tricky and repetitive platforming sequences early in the game which could easily frustrate a new player right off the bat. In addition to the platforming being pretty awkward considering the amount of precision jumping you'll have to do throughout the course of the game, grabbing onto a ledge requires you to hold A to hang on. Then you can move right or left or pull yourself up, but it's usually a bit confusing and it's hard to get used to. Yeah, I definitely have to agree with the Angry Video Game Nerd on this one. The platforming is just bad. However, with some practice you'll get used to it and it'll probably stop bugging you after a while. Next issue, the camera. Oh, it's an issue alright. Technically, there are 4 different views: normal, battle, action, and boss, but you can also look around in first-person perspective. Also, using the R button will place the camera behind you if there's no enemies around to lock onto, so I just use the R button to recenter the camera from time to time and occasionally use the first-person perspective to look around. The game is nice enough to tell you at every friggin' moment which camera perspective is being used. Really? Who cares? It could be in Virtual Boy mode for all I care, just get the damn text off the screen. So anyway, the camera sucks. It will just kind of go haywire from time to time, and if you've got your back against the wall during a fight, get ready to see what your character's insides look like. The camera itself is broken, but I don't think that necessarily breaks the game. I mean, it didn't for me anyway. As Nintendo Power said in their review, there are some difficulties with the cameras, particularly when your character is around walls. The auto-aiming feature helps enormously. Even when you can't see an enemy, you can hit it. I think it's actually hilarious that they would say that. I can't see the enemies because the camera's busted, but thank God for auto-aim so I can still hit what I can't see. Brilliant. The poor camera and awkward platforming controls come together in a perfect storm that I like to call the clock tower. I haven't had an N64 game damage my hands so much since Mario Party. Okay, enough of the negativity for a moment. Let's talk about some of the high points. They really set the mood well in this game through the atmospheric sounds I mentioned before and the gloomy backgrounds and lighting. It actually feels kind of like a survival horror game even though this is an action-adventure game. Like Castlevania II, it's more or less an open world, but you don't do a whole lot of backtracking and there's seldom a need to. In fact, sometimes you can't. It also features a similar day-night mechanic, but they took it a little bit further in this game. It's similar in that enemies are stronger at night, but there are various events and places that can only be accessed during specific times of the day or night. It works much better here than it did in Castlevania II, and the time aspect can actually impact the ending, which I'll talk about later. When it changes from day to night, it's gradual, and there's no jarring, what a horrible night to have a curse transition, thankfully. In-game days and night take a while, but luckily there are sun and moon cards that automatically move time forward to dusk or dawn, so that's pretty handy. Another highlight is the enemies. Busting up skeletons is strangely satisfying, and the giant skeleton boss is actually really cool despite looking like the skeleton of a giant gorilla running around. The Angry Video Game Nerd mentioned how ridiculous it was that there were skeletons riding motorcycles considering the game took place in 1852 and the only thing resembling a motorcycle wasn't invented until 1885, but I still think it's awesome, in a dumb way. Another thing that's cool about the enemies is that they can actually hurt each other. Check out this giant skeleton demolishing his little minions while trying to smack you with his bone club. What a bonehead. AVGN also said that the enemies are a joke, like the Frankenstein monster wielding a chainsaw, which is again ridiculous, but stupidly awesome in my opinion. Again, there might be a problem with the invention timeline here in reality, but hey, it's a video game about monsters. Forget historical accuracy. Oh, while I'm talking about this area of the game, screw this area of the game. The garden maze was cause of much hair pulling the first time I played this. The chainsaw-wielding Frankenstein monster and these 2 hellhounds can be knocked down, but they never die, and they're friggin' everywhere. Always. It defies logic. This whole sequence sucks if you don't know the maze well enough, because you have to follow this kid named Demalus. No, not malus, but malus, which actually means the same thing in Latin. Bad. Wonder if that's foreshadowing. So, you have to follow this kid Malus so you can get him to safety, but he runs ahead, and if you take the wrong turn, good luck finding him again. Not to mention you have to deal with this horseradish the whole time. Anyway, back to the baddies. There's this wolf man that knows karate for some reason. The enemies also pursue you for quite a ways before they give up, and they'll even jump over obstacles to get at you. I found their determination to be impressive, if not dunce-tastic. There are some other cool enemies, but
There's no time.
oh wait, I have to warn you, another fan favorite is back. The Medusa heads. They don't show up too often in the game, luckily, but yes, they still suck. Hard. Another thing that sucks is the enemy's spawn time. There are times when there's no enemies at all, and that's appropriate sometimes, but then there are times where it's like, damn guys, would you cool it for a minute? It's like there are more skeletons than dirt in the ground. This leads me to another major problem in this game. The slowdown. I mean the slowdown runs the gamut, from relatively no slowdown at all, to minor inconvenience, to it's really distracting and it takes away from the game. Another thing that takes away from the game a bit is the difficulty in some places. I don't mean just like, damn, this nuclear bowl is hard to beat, but difficulty akin to the unfair challenge found in Castlevania II. Well, not nearly that bad, but here, let me explain. This guy just gave me a hint about a girl showing up to water roses at dawn. Well, I think I know what I'm supposed to do, so go back to the room with the roses at dawn. Oh, it's nighttime right now. I could just sit around and wait for it to be dawn, but
There's no time.
so I'll use my sun card, right? Wrong. The fastest way is to use your moon card and wait until 3 a.m. What? Even when you know what to do, it's inconvenient as hell to wait around for her to show up, and you literally cannot progress without her. As AVGN pointed out, there are some other questionable puzzles in the game, but they're still not as bad as the deviously dodgy puzzles from Castlevania II. Some other pains from Castlevania II are back, like not being able to swim, but that can be explained away as poisonous water or whatever. There's even a throwback to the Bloody Tears track from Castlevania II here. Awesome. Another element from Castlevania II that's back are the multiple endings that I mentioned before. Yes, there are good and bad endings again based on how long it takes you to beat the game. If you beat it in under 16 in-game days, you get the good ending. Over that, and you get the bad ending. There are some other variations and additions that I won't go into, but there's actually a pretty good amount of replay value as a result. Oh yeah, that brings me back to the part about difficulty. Buckle up. Like I said, for the purpose of this review, I started playing the game on easy because, you guessed it.
There's no time.
But guess what? When you get like 3/4 of the way through the game, you fight a minor battle, and on a cliffhanger, it's like, congratulations, you beat the game on easy. Now if you want to actually finish the game you've been playing, go back and play it on normal, you big dummy. What in the known universe? What's the point of that? I mean, yeah, you get unlimited cash to buy items from this demon guy and maximum weapon energy, but I don't get it. Why? So, when you're picking the difficulty, don't pick easy. Just don't do it. The option should be normal or waste my time mode. I was so pissed when I found out that I had to play through everything again just to get to the end of the game, especially since it's already been well established now that
There's no time.
Anyway, I played through the whole game again and beat the bosses, which are wicked by the way, and finally got to the last boss. I'm not going to show you everything, but let me just say, the final battle actually had my heart in my throat and my hands all sweaty and shaky. Not many games have done that to me since I was a little kid. It probably took me about 8 or so hours to beat the game, and I got the good ending on my first try, and it's pretty good. Honestly, I actually like this game, and I want to go back and play it through as Carrie and see her ending and maybe see the bad ending and some other stuff I didn't get to see, but in case you weren't fully aware by now,
There's no time.
so I had to settle for make that 2 playthroughs. In all honesty, I think that overall, this is a good game, albeit a good game with some serious problems, but a good game. Every game has problems, some big, some small, but that doesn't necessarily make them not worth checking out and deciding for yourself. You may love it, you may hate it. I'd rather play a game with some problems that's fun to play than a technically flawless game that isn't that fun to play, and I think that the amount of fun that I had with this game outweighs the flaws for me personally. Unfortunately, this game never made it to the Virtual Console, but that's understandable since there are better games that didn't make it to the Virtual Console either. I'd say if you can find it used on the cheap, and I'm sure you can, and if you don't mind some of the problems detailed in this video, you should give it a try and decide for yourself. There's a lot more I could say about this game, good and bad, but bottom line, downfalls aside, Castlevania is a decent action-adventure game for the Nintendo 64.
So there you have it, Castlevania on the Nintendo 64. Some people thought it was a rare gem, others had beef with it. But if you're like me, you better finish these little doggies up before Dracula gets here, because there's a lot at stake. Oh, don't have a cow.